Welcome to the Empower LEP and Mind by Design podcast. I'm your host, Jana Parker. I'm a licensed educational psychologist, a group practice owner here at Mind by Design, and an owner and a mentor at Empower LEP. Today, I host Sam Young. He is the founder and head of school for Young Scholars Academy, which supports gifted and twice exceptional learners through courses and camps and community. We have a great conversation both about Young Scholars Academy and also about entrepreneurship. And he is just like kind of a wealth of information about both. And we just had this really great and very honest and authentic conversation about what it means to be an entrepreneur and kind of in this education space and taking our skills that we have in education and doing something that we love every day and building something in a way that has been really exciting and also difficult. So anywho, I had a great time talking to him, and I hope that you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Welcome back to the Empower LEP and the Mind by Design podcast. I am here today with Sam Young. Welcome.
Thank you. So excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here too. So funny story, Sam and I met recently at like a networking meeting, and he reached out to me and said like, hey, we should just like connect outside of this meeting. And I was like, yeah, that sounds good. So it turns out that Sam is the founder and head of school for Young Scholars Academy. And I have totally heard of Young Scholars Academy before, but I had no idea that I was in a networking group with Sam Young of Young Scholars Academy. I just thought it was like Young Scholars Academy. I didn't realize it was somebody's name, but it's Sam Young, which you probably did that on purpose, right?
I did, but it's funny because my sort of moniker, and I even forgot to change it like here on the Zoom, it's, Mr. Sam. I've always been called Mr. Sam my whole educational career. And so many people don't realize that my last name's Young and that it's named after me. So I like being there for that aha moment.
Yes. Well, I had it. I had the aha moment, and I brought Sam on here to talk to kind of both my community of parents through Mind by Design, as well as my community of educational psychologists who are always looking for resources for kids who are both gifted and exceptional. So Sam and Young Scholars Academy works with kids who are gifted and twice exceptional. And I also think that it's interesting how you have made a shift into the entrepreneurial world using your skill set as an educator and also as an entrepreneur to do something to like fill the need in our community with like a subset of our population. So yeah, I'm happy to have you here.
I'm excited to talk to both groups, and I really feel like this is the first time I get to do everything I love, which, these two loves are education and entrepreneurship.
Oh, well, great. Then I get what's the word I'm looking for? Like when I'm the first person who gets to do something.
You debut.
Yes, it's your debut,
yes.
But that's not the word. But
I know what you mean.
It's your entrepreneurial and educator debut combined.
For lack of a better
term that I can't think of right now. All right. Well, why don't you start by telling us about Young Scholars Academy?
So Young Scholars Academy is a virtual enrichment program. So essentially, I taught at a school called Bridges Academy for about 10 years, which is the first school to teach twice exceptional students. And for anyone who's not familiar with twice exceptional, or sometimes called 2E, the idea is that picture like a sort of bell curve. You have someone on one end who's exceptionally strong, might be someone you consider to be like gifted. So it could be like high IQ, high creativity. And then the other end, you have someone who's struggling, right? Someone with a learning difference, autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and a twice exceptional individual is in possession of both of those extremes at the same time. So that's where the dual or two exceptionalities come from. Yeah. And I was teaching at Bridges, and then of course, like many people, COVID happened, and I had this kind of aha. A bunch of parents were contacting me saying like, hey, we have family here, or we know people from a Facebook group here, and could they take your enrichment courses? I said, sure, let's do it. So it just kind of grew and grew. And the dream and the vision behind Young Scholars Academy is simple. It's that we have these kids with these beautiful big brains and they're struggling. It seems almost everywhere. They're struggling socially. They're struggling in a world that seems to focus on deficits. And my goal was to do two things. One was to bring the kind of learning that they really like into the forefront. So college level unique learning that's usually happening after school on like Reddit or Wikipedia. And then number two, to facilitate relationships around that interest area, right? Because we know these kids who are struggling socially, if they just meet kids like them, they're going to be okay and they're going to feel okay. So
Mhm.
bring the unique stuff into the center, and we have like hour a week enrichment courses that go the whole school year.
That's awesome. Where do you find a lot of your clientele?
A lot of folks like you.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
but the number one driver is our families. So we're lucky, we're very lucky. We have about 350 families, and they are vigilant, flag waving recruiters for us. So families always come to us through families, which I always think is a great sign. And I feel very fortunate. And then the second one would be professionals. So neuropsychologists, psychologists, ed therapists,
Mhm.
people, different professionals who are working with kids who they know that they're so bright. They know they have so much to offer and they see them struggling. And they usually will be also fantastic referral sources for us.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, t tell me a little bit more about like if families are trying to get more information. I mean, we'll talk about this again at the end too, but like, how do people actually get to understand what Young Scholars Academy is? Like, where would we send families and what kind of information are they going to get when they go there?
Yeah, so the best place to go is to our site, which is youngscholarsacademy.org. And when you go to the site, you'll see whatever courses we're offering seasonally. So essentially, we have like all fall courses that go from August to the winter break, December. And then we go from January to June. We have the spring semester. And then during the summer, we offer camps. And so anytime you're on the site during those seasons, which is all the season. You'll see the courses. The absolute to answer your question, the number one best way we do four of these a year is to come to an open house. We have open houses where essentially everybody comes into a Zoom room, and it's just like a back to school night at a brick and mortar school.
Yeah.
You're in a main Zoom room. We all have a big conversation. Families share their experiences. And then all the teachers, we have 16 different teachers right now, go into different breakout rooms and families can float around for 45 minutes. You can go meet every single teacher and ask them questions and kind of build that relationship before signing up.
Hmm.
And once that happens, we then share part of the recording, just the intro, because everything else is happening kind of like behind virtual doors.
Yeah.
But that it's a long-winded way to say our website, and if you can come to our open house.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So take me into like your journey of how this came to be kind of more, you said a little bit about like in COVID and you kind of switched over, but I don't know, give me a little bit more juiciness of your
Yeah,
process. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I think like most people in this field, a lot of it's really deeply personal. So I both my own self and my dad, as I sort of got more into this field, looking up, realizing I was diagnosed with ADHD at a very young age, and my dad had ADHD before there was such a thing, and dyslexia, and was like sent off to military school. He was like this really great artist and struggled with executive function skills his whole life. Um, and I saw like that difficulty as an adult of someone who, he did these fantastic, he invented like the bagel slicer and out of Lucite and sold it to Kraft in like the 70s and would do these great things. And then he would like totally struggle with, paying bills and all these other things. And kind of looking up at him and looking at myself and looking at people around me, I realized like, oh, there's people who are, like strong and struggling at the same time. And I didn't realize the strong part till later because most of the stuff that school requires is like the struggle stuff. I mentioned this to you before the episode. Like I have dyslexia and, I never read a book, right? Like I just got really good at sort of trying my best to like muscle it, but I didn't ever quite get there. Because you don't just, you don't just like will your way over something like that. Um, and so I really sort of realized that like much of the world's deficit based. And I then had this kind of aha moment Like, I was in education. I knew I wanted to be a teacher very young. I had this teacher, Mr. Dunphy, in ninth grade, and he said, I was in an English class. So I had this really spiky, like most kids I'm talking about, I had this like spiky profile. I'd be in like honors AP history, and then I'd be in the lowest level English class, in the lowest level math class. And so I had this profile, and this English teacher in ninth grade held me after, and he said, Young, stay after class. And I was like, oh, here we go. And what are you doing here, Young? And I said, what do you mean, sir? And he said, why are you wasting your time? And I was like, oh man, he's on to me. I'm a bad reader, and all the insecurities, right? And he's like,
Yeah.
you're too damn smart to be here. And I was like, this is the first time someone ever said that to me in an English class. And he's like, you should take honors. But I didn't that year because I thought he was so good. I wanted to stay with him. But he challenged me the next year to, challenge myself essentially.
Yeah.
And I just always wanted to be like that guy that would do something really awesome. And so I became a teacher because of him.
Yeah.
Um, and then, yeah, I had this kind of light bulb moment as I got older. I read this quote, Dr. Joseph Renzulli, is a famous psychologist in gifted education out of the University of Connecticut. And it's kind of a mouthful. He was my mentor's mentor. So I studied under Dr. Susan Baum, who was she wrote a book in the 80s called Gifted and Learning Disabled before there was even a term called twice exceptional.
Wow.
So she literally wrote the book.
Wow. Yeah.
And I studied under her, and she studied under Joe. And Joe had this quote at an interview at the University of Connecticut. And it really like stopped me in my track. I don't think it's as prophetic for other people when I share it, but it blew me away. And he said, nobody cares about Einstein's ability to paint or Picasso's ability to do complex math. Right? Nobody cares about Einstein's ability to paint or Picasso's ability to do complex math. And then he went on to say, so why are we so obsessed with kids being good at everything? And it just hit me. I was like, oh my God. Like I live in Los Angeles, it's true. Why all my friends who are writers and producers and directors, like I don't care how good they are at poetry or math.
Right.
These are people who are like supremely good at one thing.
Yeah.
And that makes them great. And people work under them and help them with the things they're bad at.
Right.
And I just thought like this could not be, it's 180 degrees out from how education is.
Yeah.
And then, like most people, I'm like, the system's so big. I want to change it. I think you and I spoke about this previously. And then I was like, well, I maybe can't do that, but I can give kids like an hour a day of change. And one of the first moms, I am so long-winded, I'm sorry.
No, I'm great. I'm all in. I'm all
Okay.
in.
I one of the earliest moms at Young Scholars Academy created this quote, which sums up, I think, everything that we aim to do. And she said, the YSA glow. And she said, my son Simon takes your class and he's euphoric for 24 hours. And if we just take one a day, he can get through the week.
Yeah.
And she's like, that's like the level of acceptance and friendship and so forth. So I sort of almost like gave up on this dream, but I pivoted from like trying to make big systemic change in the system working in public schools and thought like I can just give people very real, instant gratifying change and help them find their people, which we know is, exponential right over the course of a lifetime.
Right. Ah, wow. Okay. So you started this during COVID?
Yeah, so I was still at Bridges, and like most stories, there's a strong wife behind behind me. So I met my wife, and she was, this smart, beautiful, driven, successful, connected woman. She worked in sales. She was the first woman to work for this company in this industry, and was like top in her, field, and so inspired. And I was, a classroom teacher, and obviously humans are pretty simple, right? Like I wanted to impress her and do better so that we could be together. But in truthfulness, she connected me with amazing people in her circle. My now brother-in-law, her childhood friend, entrepreneurs, very successful. And I sort of found my people with the people she plugged me into. And they helped me formulate the early idea, as well as having a mentor. One of my classmates from graduate school connected me with this woman, Debbie Steinberg Kuntz, who started a program called Bright and Quirky just a year before me or two. And she was the first one to start like it's basically a parents group of twice exceptional, parents of twice exceptional kids. And between my brother-in-law Tony and my wife's friend Nick and Debbie, I had this sort of board of directors all of a sudden of people who were, helping me go from, thinking to doing.
Yeah.
And Debbie was sort of at the top. She was doing what I wanted in the field that I wanted and mentored me out of the goodness of her heart for a year. She said, if you help me work for me, I'll take you on. And long story short, that combination of all these three people helped me to understand entrepreneurship, read the right books, be able to experiment. And I found since then, actually, that, I said this in the beginning, education is really one of my first loves. And I found entrepreneurship as maybe my second. I love the idea of like solving problems. And I think back, feels like it's in my DNA. I love it. And of course, I'm not alone, right? Like when you look at the numbers, I think it's something like 60% of entrepreneurs have ADHD or dyslexia. And I think like 40% of CEOs, right? So there's this, I don't know. Yeah, it feels really good.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's really powerful. So you so I hear you saying like the connections that you had with other people was really important. These are like things that, I think for my audience who does work in schools, it's hard to think about how am I going to make that leap from like doing what I'm doing to doing what, whatever this not even yet full formed idea, but something that I want, and taking that leap. And so I'm always interested in hearing the stories of people who have done it and I mean, the kinds of things that they lean on are really similar, right? And for you, it was a lot about connection and having mentors and people to kind of coach you in different ways so that you could take your ideas to fruition. So that's amazing. And you got a great wife out of it too. So
Yeah. Yes, yes. I mean, she really was the driving force.
that's
Um,
awesome.
yeah. And I think, I would say it is difficult and there's so much bad information out there. And, you have to really love, you and I were talking about this before we started, like it's middle of the night type stuff, right? This is not the straight and narrow, easy, it feels like I'm not a parent, but I say like, this is my baby, it really feels like a lot.
Yeah.
And so I always like to say, well, I could go on. I don't know. I'll let you guide me, but I could say a lot to people who are considering being entrepreneurs.
Yeah, you can keep going. They've heard from me. This is your show.
Oh, well, I don't know if you want me to go in a certain direction. So interrupt me at any point. How about
Okay, I
that?
will. I will. I'll just sit back here with my water and keep listening.
Well,
Tell
I
us
would say,
more,
I think
Sam.
a lot of people, yeah, I think there's a lot of bad information out there. I think that there's also again, I live in the United States. There's a lot of sort of worship of entrepreneurs, and that can be harmful as well. I think it really is hard, and the cliche of like, if I knew how hard it was going to be, I wouldn't have done it.
Hmm.
Um, the I think it's a very exciting, authentic problem solving experience, and I think that a lot of people. I remember when I was first starting and I was just comparing myself all day. I was looking at people who were doing things and they seemed so successful. And some of them were. And some of them burnt out because they were so focused on X, Y, or Z and they couldn't keep it going. And I thought, wow, how can I be like them? And then 6 months later, their doors are closed, right? So it is a bit of a wild ride. When you look at the numbers, you know, it doesn't make sense to be an entrepreneur. It doesn't usually work out for most people.
Yep.
So you have to really have like a deep commitment and desire and burning drive. And also, I think that there's a lot of great models and good systems out there that you can sort of test your ideas with before you go full tilt boogie. One thing I recommend to everybody is find someone who's doing what you're doing and work under them for a little bit, or find someone who's doing something adjacent and work under them and learn from them. And another thing that I like to say is if you are still a classroom teacher or working in schools, it will take you longer than you think. So, the cliche of like the best time to start was yesterday and, today's the second best time.
Hmm.
But I would say like, don't leave your job, like start moonlighting. If you do 2 hours a day times five, that's 10 hours. Plus you put in an 8 hour Saturday. I mean, all of a sudden you're working 18, 20 hours a week on your side project. And it will take that over time, right? You need to focus on so many things. And I love this stuff. I do a lot of talks on entrepreneurship, so I could go on and on. But I think the most important thing that I tell everybody is to focus on your niche, right? Niche down as much as you can. Focus on I think, I forget, Seth Godin said this. I think it's like, if you have you picture like a dropper, if you want to affect change, like a little food coloring dropper, it's like you could drop that in the ocean, right? Or you can drop it in a bathtub, and so
Mhm.
if you can go even to a sink, you'll change the color faster. So the more narrow you can be, of course, being data driven, look online. Are the things you're trying to do, are there Facebook groups? Are people gathering around these ideas? Are there people with problems to solve? And what do you have to offer them? What's at the intersection of your strengths, your talents? I love the model. I don't know if you've seen this, Jana, the Ikigai.
No.
It's like a Japanese Venn diagram. It means the reason for being,
Hmm.
and it's four spheres. If you picture four spheres like a cross, it's what you're good at, what you love, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for.
Mm.
And the idea is like between some of those, like what you're good at, what you love, that's a passion, and what the world needs and what you can be paid for, that could be a vocation. And if you can find the center, it's like this essentially like meaningful living.
Right.
And I think a lot of entrepreneurs think like, I'm really passionate or I'm really good at this thing. And they're not thinking, does the world need it? Is this a big problem?
Right.
Is this
Right.
something that I can help people solve? It might just be a hobby, the thing that you want to do.
Right.
Right. And that's okay.
Right.
Uh, so anyway, sorry.
Well, you just said so many amazing things there, and I think you really got real, which I appreciate, and because I like to be really positive with this whole group I have, Empower LEP. This whole business is really related to helping people really think like I can do this, like I can make this shift, I can um, find that little target in the middle and um, make a difference in this world doing what I'm good at and what I love, what I'm passionate about, what I'm skilled at, what I'm here to do, living my purpose. And at the same time, it is no joke how hard this is and how much you're thinking about it. It is like your baby. I did the same thing as you. I worked under somebody else for many, many years before I started my own. Then I started my own while I was still working in the schools, so I built it up slowly. So it was a process of close to 10 years that no, it was 10 years that I worked in private practice before having my own private practice,
Hmm.
9 or 10 years and, or fully having my own private practice. So I mean, and now, like, I'm at the gym. If I don't go to a CrossFit class, I go work out every morning at 5 a.m. Usually I'm like waking up, like writing down notes of things that I was thinking about while I was sleeping
Hmm.
first thing so that I don't forget them. Then I'm working out at 5 a.m. And if I'm not in a CrossFit class, then I'm at the gym like I was this morning, like listening to leadership and business podcasts as I'm
Hmm.
working out. I mean, I heard something, one of the things I was listening to the other day was about, like the top leadership recommendations or like the top things that you need as a leader. And it was like grit. I don't think he said grit, but it was like grit. It was one of those
Hmm.
where it's like you have to be with it all the time and stick with it and stick with it and stick with it. And you like can't waver. You have to just have that drive. That maybe it was drive that he said. Yeah, you have to have that drive because and then you also have to try to figure out a way to like be balanced. So today I was listening to something else that was about like, how do you scale your business and be okay with like get like stepping into the owner, from operator to manager to
Hmm.
owner, and then like having things in the business running without you, and how do you set up your system so that it's doing that. And then I'm like, wait, but then I feel guilty. If I did that, I'd feel guilty. If I wasn't working 80 hours a week, I would feel
Hmm.
guilty. Like, what would my staff think of me? So there's just so many things that go into um business ownership, and so many fears. Like I'm working on a contract of somebody that I'm going to work with. And it's kind of taking a while because with this contract, like I have to make sure that it is like super legit. I can't just be like, oh, I'm going to just like ask ChatGPT to make me up a contract for the service that I need. Like no, I have to actually get an attorney, which guess what
Hmm.
that means? That means I have to spend money, like,
Hmm.
and people who haven't had that, like, um, haven't been on the side of like understanding what it means to run a business and how much risk you're taking with all of it too. Um, they just don't, you just don't understand. Like, there's a lot that goes, along with that. So these are the kinds of things I'm thinking about all the time. So I'm totally like, yeah, I mean, we can't always just talk about the amazing pieces of it. I mean, the reality is it is amazing. And it is also so much more work than I was doing when I had like a
Yeah, yeah,
8 to 4 school job,
yeah,
you know,
right. Yeah,
even
I
if
think
I
I
was
think
writing reports. Like,
that's one of the big differences. I think like again we kind of romanticize this idea of like being the free entrepreneur and that's awesome. But like you're not spending your free time a lot of the times doing what you thought you would do. You're doing things that you think will grow your business.
right, right. Yeah,
I think it's important to keep it real.
yeah,
And again, I love it, and I still elect to do it every
mhm,
day. You
yeah.
know, I also want people to know it's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, and so like, so let's kind of shift a bit and talk about what you do love about your business and where you kind of see it going and how you're how you're managing this with 16 people working for you who and it's all remote, so everybody's virtual. Just give us a little insight into how that's working.
Yeah. So sort of big picture, my goal has always been sort of twofold. One is to build a really authentic, meaningful community that feels like in person, right? Where our kids have social clubs, they have places to connect, the parents feel the same, and there's just a place that they can, belong. So I like to take what we have. We have 350 families right now, and my goal would be to grow that. I don't have a magic number necessarily. I've always thought like 2,000, but there isn't really like a hard and fast number. And then the second one would always be to have a parent community on top of that. Because, right, I know when we work with kids, a lot of times they're making the progress and the parents aren't, sometimes aren't. Sorry, parents. But sometimes the kids are they're quick to adapt and they're making transitions. And as parents, a lot of parents are like human, right? And what do humans do? We sort of hold on to our own feelings and our beliefs. And I think the late Sir Ken Robinson once said, "Everybody's had an education, and we all have an opinion about one." Right? So parents might be holding on to, their understanding of what it means to have a gifted kid or twice exceptional or how that should look in school and what education needs to be like. So I think helping parents also allows us to sort of grow in the way that we help make big change because
Yeah.
kids go home to families. And then I also dream of having a version that will reach people asynchronously. So kind of like self-paced courses and ways for people to meet up almost without having to be live synchronous because that ultimately would allow us to reach everybody. And that's the goal is to kind of reach like the far corners. So those are sort of like the kind of one, two, three. The two are the primary, the kids, and then the parents, and then maybe the asynchronous thing. As far as, you know, managing, well, let me just add one thing, which is that, one of the things that's so exciting and difficult is that you are playing with wet cement all the time, right? So you can make anything happen. I have guiding principles, like we have these semesters and they're this long, but like, do they have to be that way?
Right.
And no, these are all make pretend. So there's excitement that comes with that, and then also some overwhelm.
Yeah.
And you're like, I've literally built this thing, and it's it can change. The other thing I would say, in terms of like managing, I have found, yeah, having like trying to automate as much as possible is really helpful. I think people love this idea of automation. A lot of things just can't be automated, but if you can create, so yeah, I have 16 teachers and then a two-person admin team, and then various contractors. And I had this aha moment. I want to share this with you. I think this is really important for my visual people listening. I pictured like a bicycle rim, with all the spokes. And I realized last year I was the hub. Every spoke would go through me. And that's not good. I'm bottlenecking the growth, right? I think there's a time when there's like a founder, and then there's a time when the founder needs to become a CEO and really systematize things. So
Mhm.
I have been working over the last year to really systematize things so that I can not show up and it runs. So I've every year I schedule like a long trip with my wife, and it forces. I got this idea from this great book. I think every entrepreneur should read Clockwork.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
it's Michael Michalowicz. And he says like plan a trip and then pick up the book, like, and it forces you, we're going to go away. There have to be SOPs and all these things.
Uh-huh.
But the biggest, I will say, like I will name a tool, which is Slack. Like having a Slack has been huge because we are all remote. I find that having, the capacity to make different hubs where we can communicate with teachers, the teachers can all communicate together in a public forum. We have meetups every month where there's kind of like a social hour, and just working to create the community that we're offering the families and also have that for us.
Yeah. Question about the this kind of, I guess, a logistical question, but just made me think, with your staff and the courses that you offer, do you develop your courses off of like the areas of interest and expertise of your staff, or are you looking for staff to fit courses that you already have?
It starts with the demand that I'm looking for. In other words, parents will want something, robotics, let's say, right? And I'm like, well, I don't know how to do that. And then so I'll ask everybody that we hire is word of mouth. Uh,
Mm,
I only hire from my teacher's recommendations or my parents. And it started with my grad school. I was just poaching people from my grad school. And then, we kind of grew like their recommendation and so forth. But it starts that way. And then once you get to know someone, you look at their talents and you think what can they offer, and then what's the intersection between their strengths and talents and passions and interests and the needs of our community. And I think that's such an important moniker, really. That's not the right word, but it's such an important kind of, so it's almost like a dogmatic practice for me. Like I'm in the business of helping kids to identify their strengths and develop them into talents.
yeah.
And ironically, I sometimes forget to do that with my own staff. And so I've really tried to like, what is this person? What are they communicating to me? Where would they be strong? It might be that I need to like recreate a role for them or move them into a different role. And there's many people who I've hired to do one thing and are doing something so far removed from what I hired them to do, but they're meeting a need that I have or that we have as a community.
Yeah. Interesting. Um, so can you give us just a little flavor of like the different kinds of courses that you have?
Yeah. So one of the things that really kind of lit my brain on fire at first when I was starting was like that many of our students do well when they're in college because it's such specified learning. You're not taking like ninth grade history, you're taking, women in the Vietnam War or something, right? It's ultimately way more attractive.
Yeah.
And I thought, these kids are bumping into other people in the dark, struggling to socialize. They'll talk at someone about trains or whatever it might be that they're really passionate about. And I was like, why don't we just bring that? Like, why don't we just do that? So I just would think sort of an avatar. This is a great exercise for people, I think, as well, especially entrepreneurs. If you think about who the avatar is that you're serving, take all the people that you've met and sort of compile them into a singular person. And I wrote down like a 20-page avatar of like the parent that we're serving and the child that we're serving. And of course, there's a cliche like once you've met a twice exceptional student, you've met one twice exceptional student. So,
Right.
right, our students are wildly different. But I sort of took the students that were early on and I kind of like, what are they looking for? And I asked them, right? I think that's important for two reasons. One, it helps people give you their honest thoughts and feedback. And two, people want to be a part of something that they're co-creating. And so I asked, what are you looking for? And yeah, I tried to make it like really attractive stuff. So, we have like psychology for 5-year-olds, World War I and World War II weaponry. Or, we have AP psychology. We have had classes on cryptocurrency investing, Dungeons and Dragons, robotics. We have a video game coding class using Unity. And then we have classes that are sort of decentralized where it's like passion project class. So a kid is meeting with one of two mentors who's either a science, STEAM person or an arts, humanities person. And then they pair up with a mentor in a small group and they go through like the project ideation. So it's them totally driving what they want to do. We had a student like make a solar oven, and we've had a student write a book or make a product line. So trying to do all the stuff that I think really matters, um, and that students really care about, and then have them make friends around, these interests.
Yeah. Awesome. Amazing. Well, is Young Scholars Academy, I mean, I look at it as like kids who are gifted and kids who are twice exceptional. Is that?
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
primarily, I really founded ours as a 2E program originally.
Hmm.
And as I learned more about giftedness, and because my background was 2E, and then as I learned more about giftedness and studied more about giftedness, and I realized, well, they're actually very similar, right? You have these gifted
Hmm.
kids with these big brains, and they have all these struggles as a result of their giftedness. Um, and so we have a tremendous amount of gifted families as well.
Yeah. Okay. So as we wrap up, tell me just for the entrepreneurs in our group who might be listening, what is some guidance you might have given yourself early on, or, something you might say to somebody who's thinking about stepping outside of the box in whatever fashion that means for them?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to validate your idea before you take it out, right? And I mean, ask people, talk to people, get some data, use tools online, how Google Trends or something, how many people are searching this? Is it a vast blue ocean, or is it maybe overly settled and saturated? And before you run off, there's so many people that like work so hard and like, but it's a good idea. And it's like, well, yes, you think that. And I love your passion, but I don't know that other people have that need, right? Like I remember reading this thing and it's like, what's the best way to sell a hot dog, right? And all these people are like, oh, you have to have, organic this or this and that. And it's like, no, you just need a crowd of raving, hungry fans, right?
Right.
Like the best way to sell a hot dog is stand outside of Fenway Park at the end of a baseball game, right?
Right.
Like
Right.
you need to make sure that there's people that want the stuff that you have to offer.
Right.
And then I think the next thing that I would encourage people to do is figure out, you don't need to I think people make business plans and all this stuff. A lot of that's busy work. I like to think of outputs rather than inputs.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to meditate and then journal and do all, and those things are all great. I think that it is important. I think a lot of people are successful as a result of their routines. But I think it's really important to focus on your outputs.
Yeah. You
Is
got to
this
get
going to
out
be
there and
something that
do.
reaches?
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So I would say to folks, create something that solves problems up front. And even before you're ready to have a business, just build your list, create some kind of lead magnet, some kind of freebie, some kind of thing that's so good that you're scared to give it away, and give it away in exchange for people's email list so that when you're ready, because it will take you longer than you think it will, when you're ready to launch, you will have fans, people you've already nurtured and so forth. So I think that's probably the most important two things. Number one is to start validating, and number two is to start list building before you think you're ready.
Love that. Um, well, gosh, Sam. Okay, so people want to find Young Scholars Academy. They go to.
Yeah, so just go to youngscholarsacademy.org. That would be the best place. And again, if you're on our site, it'll tell you seasonally what's going on and when our open houses are. And we have rolling enrollment. So you could go check out a course today and sign up today. And then we have sort of new semesters always starting around the corner. And yeah.
Awesome. Well, you're definitely talking to a group of professionals who are very into kind of celebrating and nurturing neurodiversity, and like people who recognize that number one, like two things can be true at the same time. You can be both um, you can have both strengths and struggles. Um, and also that there in education, there's just like a lot of not strength-based language and
Mm-hmm.
practices going on. And I think this is a group of inspired professionals who are really doing what we can to make this shift toward having seeing everything through a strength-based lens. So you're speaking to the right group here. And I also hope that some parents um, who have kids who might benefit from Young Scholars Academy listen in and get some insight here. So thanks so much for joining me, Sam. I'm really glad that we're connected.
Thank you. And I really appreciate you creating these two dedicated spaces for parents and for professionals. And like what you're doing is so neat, right? Like I kind of mentioned my story of like the mentor, and I think you're serving as a mentor for these two communities. And that's a fantastic thing. So thank you.
Thank you. This episode of the Empower LEP podcast is brought to you by one of my newest trainings on the Empower LEP platform, How to Network and Grow Your Business. This was one of my favorite trainings to record because it's one of my favorite things to do. And while this may not be one of everyone's favorite things to do, networking is absolutely essential for growing your practice. So we are going to talk about all things networking in this course. It is self-paced. You can get it on empowerlep.com. Thank you for listening to the Empower LEP podcast. Episodes can be found at empowerlep.com. If you liked what you heard, please leave a 5-star rating and review on your favorite podcast player. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, or if you have any questions for me, don't hesitate to connect. I would love to learn more. I can be found at jana@empowerlep.com.